For that, let's get perspective from Sanjay Kapoor, the former CEO at Bharti Airtel, and he's joining us. Great to have you with us, Mr. Kapoor. Very good evening. And of course, though we don't have the final absolute figures, at roughly 1.5 lakh crore rupees, this mop-up from the 5G spectrum auction, it's almost double what the government made from the 4G auctions that were sold last year, and 3 times as much the 3G auctions which took place in 2010. The expectation this time from the 5G spectrum auction was roughly around 80 to 90,000 crores. But now at 1.5 lakh crores, does this make the government the biggest winner in the auctions? Also from the perspective of participation of bidders in all the bands that were on offer, like the Telecom Minister was just pointing out to my colleague.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. And, you are probably right that at the current moment, it seems as if the government is the winner and they have achieved what they wanted to on the overall investment and collections for the government eventually. However, I wish and I hope that the game doesn't remain like that, because if only government is the winner, then 5G and the operators will not succeed. I think this can only succeed when the customer is the winner, because customer gets the best experience. He's willing to pay a price. Operators are willing to make or are able to make money out of their proposition, and then the use cases build up on a great start. So I think it should be finally a win-win for the whole ecosystem. As we look at the auctions right now, I think it's a good beginning that everybody has squared off their requirements for spectrum in every circle. India is probably the most complex auctions that any nation can talk about. Though we are one nation, the auctions don't happen at a national level, they happen at a circle level. And we still operate on those 22 geographies and bid in each geography and try to assimilate and make sense of our spectrum in every geography. And therefore you see the tussle, and that's how UP East got stuck between two operators, where both of them were wanting to round off their 1800 megahertz spectrum to a level where it made sense for them and for their customers. So I think a great beginning. Now that this is over, the next level would be to make a sense of your deployments and put up your plans to roll out.
Yes.
I think the minister was right that there'll be some bit of fixed wireless access that will happen. That has happened in every part of the world. But you need an infrastructure for that as well. You need backhaul, you need fiber. Wherever you have E-band, probably you'll use E-band. And you'll need a lot more penetration, because a lot of data in 5G, like 4G, will get consumed indoors. And therefore, you'll have to penetrate indoors to offer a consumer experience in every nook and corner. And
Sure.
especially if you want to go towards Internet of Things and low latency, you can't afford any dark spots. You'll have to provide a blemishless coverage wherever those services have to be accorded and wherever those use cases have to be deployed.
Indeed. So even as we digest what is likely to happen by what you've seen in the auction so far, for the price at which the spectrum was available, how expensive or not was it for the four main bidders? Jio was the most aggressive of the lot. Bharti, Airtel, Vodafone and Adani followed in that order. Who, according to you, is likely to make the most of what comes their way from the 5G auction for the kind of price they would have acquired it for?
Look, there are no great surprises in this auction. We always knew with the earnest money deposits that Reliance is going to be the most aggressive, followed by Airtel. And Voda will play a marginal game wherever it makes sense for them. And that's exactly how the auctions have panned out. If you look at Jio and you exclude the 700 megahertz, then Airtel is not too far away from the monies that they've committed. You put aside that 39,000 crores of 700 megahertz, then Airtel is in the ballpark. And also you have to keep in mind that unlike Jio, Airtel has three technologies that they currently support. So they support 2G, 3G and 4G, although they have been sunsetting their 3G gradually in most parts of the country, but they still have a lot of spectrum dedicated to 2G, and they have voice sitting on 2G as well and 4G both. So for them, they have a refarming opportunity with the spectrum that sits with them, which is lesser with Jio, because Jio has only one technology, 4G, and I don't see 4G dying and 5G standalone happening. So in India, for a long time, you'll see 4G and 5G will coexist, and there'll be applications and use cases around a mix of these two technologies. So Airtel has that advantage of refarming some of the 2G as they sunset 2G and 3G as they sunset 3G, and then play 4G and 5G. Whereas Jio has a lesser refarming opportunity compared to Airtel, but they've got the very potent 700 megahertz. And that will put pressure on Airtel because Airtel also wants a great in-building coverage, though they have 900 megahertz. But that may not suffice, and 700 is more potent, like I said. And also, unlike the previous auctions where 700 wasn't getting sold, this time a price has been determined for 700, which means now nobody will be able to get it cheaper than that. The benchmark price is established. So there'll be some pressure on Airtel at some stage to go and acquire 700 megahertz of spectrum or increase their sub gigahertz spectrum, to be competitive for a great customer experience.
Also, Mr. Kapoor, the main telecom players, Jio, Airtel and Vodafone, they had called out the government's move to allot spectrum to enterprises for 5G private networks. They said it defies a level playing field and it facilitates the backdoor entry, like they called it, of the big telecom technology players, and this to become service providers without having to follow regulatory compliance and also escaping the payment of levies that the legacy telecom service providers are subjected to. Now that the auctions have happened, Mr. Kapoor, and spectrum is going to be allotted to companies to set up these 5G private networks, who, according to you, is likely to gain the most from it? And will they gain at the cost of 5G revenues of the big telecom players?
So, this is a very general discussion that happens everywhere. Whenever a new technology and such a big technological leap happens, then there are others who are sitting in the peripheries who want a share of that pie. And I think it's an obvious move by large IT companies to have a share of that pie, also a large infrastructure company that wants to have a share of that pie, and they bid as well in this auction. But the thing is that over time, we've seen that there's an equilibrium that sets in, and all these companies coexist. Even for enterprise solutions today, the IT companies and telcos work together, and that's the order of the day in virtually every part of the world. Every market they collaborate. There is a coming together of a larger ecosystem. So my take is that initially at this stage there's a give and take. There's a threat that they'll come and eat up. But I think in this sort of a play, winner takes it all is not the formula. And my own take is it will settle down to an equilibrium where there'll be room for the IT players and there'll be room for the telecom players. However, the government is still not sure how to allocate the administrative spectrum, how to do it. They're still doing some fact finding, as they say. So eventually we'll figure out. But I don't anticipate that the IT companies will come and gobble up the entire enterprise space of the telcos, and telcos will allow that, because ultimately, no matter what service you put together, you'll need connectivity with all these telcos. You cannot operate in isolation. You cannot develop islands and operate technological services out of there. So I think they'll be collaborative with each other. There's a push and pull at this stage. Eventually, it'll settle down.
Fair enough. So if it has got to be a win-win situation, and you did start off by talking about users making this successful, the 5G spectrum and what has happened by way of the auctions, that process is complete only if the users find it as useful as 5G is supposed to be. How do you reckon the user experience changing from 4G to 5G? You said the two ecosystems are going to coexist. At what price do you imagine 5G is going to come at for users?
That is $1 million question, if you really ask me, because right now the experience globally has no substantive evidence that says that consumer is willing to pay a bigger price for 5G. And that's a struggle that the operators have had globally. Now, more than 200 operators have rolled up 5G services. I've been personally involved with some over the last couple of years, and they all struggle to up their revenues because of 5G services, with a large deployment of capital that all of them have done. It's a new capital cycle that all of them have gone through. And my worry is that India is starting at a very low level of 175, 178 rupees per customer. And to start from here and to expect the 5G customer to pay you overly too much is probably utopian, given our circumstances. Plus, right now, the penetration of devices is much less in India of 5G compared to the rest of the world. So I think that will build up over time. And if I see the colossal infrastructure that some of them have set, India has some catch up to do, no matter how brave we position ourselves to be. Look at China, for example. They have more than 3 million 5G sites all across the country. They have close to 1 billion customers now. And they're talking about trebling that infrastructure over the next 3-4 years. If you look at isolated operators, they by and large have maximum of 250, 260,000 towers per operator. Now, where do they go from here? If they have to offer really use cases like Internet of Things or low latency applications, how many sites will they need? A million, 500,000, 1.5 million? I think is anybody's guess.
Sure.
But they need definitely a lot bigger infrastructure that exists today.
Right.
They need a lot bigger backhaul that exists than today, a lot bigger fiberization than that exists today. And then finally, use cases and propensity of the customers to pay higher. So I
Absolutely.
think those odds, those marketing odds are
Yes.
stacked against us at the moment.
Absolutely. So we'll see exactly how this pans out. We're at the cusp of a big change that is likely to take place. How this pans out for all the stakeholders is going to be very keenly watched. Thanks very much for your perspective on this, Mr. Kapoor. Always a pleasure chatting with you about the telecom industry.